Thank you, Nate, very much for that introduction. Good evening, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here and to participate in this incredible panel. And I want to start by introducing our panelists tonight. So I'll go through the introductions. I'll ask each one to stand after I read these incredible bios that we have here, and then we'll begin the presentations. So the format will be about a 10 to 15 minute slide PowerPoint presentation for each of the subjects from each panelist. And I'll start with Tara Green. Tara is a principal of Public Realm Strategies for the Office of James Burnett Landscape Architecture here in Dallas. She is accomplished in park programming, park management, community engagement, and strategic planning. A member of Downtown Dallas, Inc., Tara is committed to creating coalitions of support and diverse stakeholders and community groups, and excels at partnership development. And that's going to be one of the themes tonight is partnership. And I think we've got a world-class panel in that regard. After 2 decades of working in leadership positions in the sports and entertainment industry, Tara brought extensive experience to her role as president of Clyde Warren Park, one of the game changers for Dallas. Always focused on the total visitor experience, Tara led the team that transformed Clyde Warren into Dallas's top tourist and visitor destination, building a vibrant community of people that returned to the park over and over again. These were not one-time visits. Responsible for the team that curated and produced the park's over 1,300 free activities and special events throughout the year, Tara ensured that the park's overall programming was comprehensive, the operations were well-run, and served diverse needs of our city. During Tara's tenure, Clyde Warren Park won 39 national and international awards, including the top award from the Urban Land Institute, their Urban Open Space Award in 2014. Please join me in welcoming Tara Green. Tara, would you please stand? Amy Meadows is president and CEO of Parks for Downtown Dallas, a private operating foundation that develops public parks in the city center of Dallas through a public-private partnership with the Dallas Park and Recreation Department. Parks for Downtown Dallas is overseeing the design and construction of 4 new parks identified in the 2013 Downtown Parks Master Plan update, including Pacific Plaza, which opened in 2019, West End Square in 2021, and Carpenter Park in 2022. The final project, Harwood Park, will open later this year. And I hope you've all seen the woolly mammoths that have been constructed there in the playground. So exciting. Also, Parks for Downtown Dallas is raising endowment funds to assist in maintaining these parks in perpetuity. Previously, Amy served for 11 years as the vice president and executive director of the Belo Foundation before it became Parks for Downtown Dallas. She's been active in the Dallas nonprofit community for 30 years through board roles for the Hudson Foundation, Downtown Dallas, Inc., and was program director, then executive director, Social Venture Partners in Dallas in the early 2000s. She is a sustaining member of the Junior League of Dallas, a graduate of Leadership Texas and Leadership Dallas, and a former commissioner appointed by Governor George Bush to the Texas Commission on Volunteerism and Community Service. Please join me in welcome Amy Meadows. Bud Melton, a 5th-generation Texas native, has championed equitable, purposeful pedestrian and bicycle mobility throughout his career. For many years, Bud served as founder, board member, and president of Texas Trails Network. He led research for what became the Texas Department of Public Safety's Super Cyclist Youth Bicycle Safety Training Program, and served as board chair of Bike Texas, a statewide advocacy and education nonprofit. Bud was a delegate to the Texas Department of State Health Services Texas Active Living Network and a DFW area multi-agency collaboration known as the STREAM team. Bud joined his wife, Annie, who is also here tonight, Annie's Mobility Alternatives consulting firm in 1995 in partnership with Dr. Albert Half. Bud began planning, designing, studying, and advising on modal optionality for off-street multi-use trails. Annie and Bud's firm led or assisted Half and served other firms with bikeway, trail, and streetscape plans, designs for scores of cities and counties in Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. Bud currently serves advisory councils for UTA Kappa's Master in Landscape Architecture program and for Dallas ISD's Choice City Lab High School Foundation. So please welcome Bud Melton. Our fourth panelist was Paul Dyer. Unfortunately, Paul had a health issue this weekend and is unable to make it here tonight, so I'll be filling in for him and giving his presentation, which we both worked on anyway, so it shouldn't be too much of a stretch for me. But please join me in wishing Paul well as he recuperates from his illness. I also want to recognize some other couple of ladies in the room tonight that are very important. When I first joined the Park Department in 1993 as the Superintendent of Design and Construction, I always wanted to be a superintendent. I love that title. The chairman of the Dallas Park and Recreation Board from that period, Ms. Lois Finkelman, is here, and I appreciate you coming, Lois. Provided incredible leadership to the department for many, many years, and then went on also in the National Recreation and Park Association, became the president of that organization. And the NRPA is having its national convention in Dallas later this year. So we're very excited to host them. And then finally, I would just like to give a shout out to my beautiful wife, Jan, who is also here. This is her first public appearance with her new knee and giving it a tryout. So, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give you now Paul's presentation. You speaking notes, but it's unfortunately printed at 8-point font, so we'll see how that goes. All right, we're going to start. First of all, so the topics that I'm going to cover is sort of a broad umbrella overview of Dallas parks and 25 years of design inspiration. Obviously, there's a lot of landscape projects that are going to be here. There is some architecture. The one thing I'm not going to talk about tonight is Fair Park. That would be a whole nother panel, a 2-hour panel discussion. And if you ask me a question about Fair Park, you'll be here all night. So be forewarned on that. So we're going to start with the Dallas Zoo. The zoo has had, for those of you that have been going there for over many years, has had a fairly interesting history. This by way of recital, 1990 was a key year when it went from 50 acres to 100 acres when the tunnel was built under Clarendon that opened up the wilds of Africa, for those of you that remember that epic event. And there is good architecture just around the zoo. One of my favorite projects is the Meadows Animal Healthcare Facility, which no one ever sees because it's behind the scenes. It's one of the most extraordinary buildings and works of architecture in Dallas designed by Joe McCall at the Oglesby Group at the time. I'm going to fast forward to the year 2006 when we were able to attract one of the top zoo directors in America to Dallas. He previously was director of the Fort Worth Zoo, and in the great Cincinnati Zoo, Greg Hudson. Unfortunately, Greg passed away about 4 weeks ago, and we'll miss him tremendously. He did an incredible job and provided extraordinary leadership. And his first great project was the opening of the Giants of the Savannah exhibit in 2010, which was this image shows, it was the first multi-species animal habitat in the United States that had giraffes, elephants, zebras, all you can see there, impalas, ostriches, just as they would coexist together on the plains of Africa. That was a $5 million project in city bonds and $6 million. Then another extraordinary thing that happened, the zoo was privatized under the leadership of the Dallas Zoological Society and Greg Hudson. That was also a game changer for the zoo. The next big exhibit that opened in 2018 was the Simmons Hippo Outpost, which was a 2.1 acre immersive exhibit with a 120,000 gallon pool of underwater viewing. And if you can imagine the quantity of lettuce heads it takes to fill the stomach that's attached to that mouth. The current projects at the zoo include a new 585 space parking garage that will be built behind the Clarendon Avenue DART station on the hill. The construction will start on that in early 2024. The Dallas Arboretum, of course, under Mary Brinegar's inspired leadership, similar to Greg, we've been blessed with executive directors like Greg and like Tara, Clyde Warren Park, and their successors, and Mary's leadership at the Arboretum, and her projects are extraordinary, including Rosine Hall as part of the Visitor Education Pavilion designed by Lake Flato, and Russell Buchanan, Tasteful Place, completed about 5 years ago with an incredible herb garden. Other projects, landscape and garden design projects, were equally important as these. I'm just showing you mainly the architecture, since we're in the architecture forum tonight. Golf was another big effort for the department, upgrading our system of golf courses. This was principally Paul's passion and love that he put into renovating our golf system. We had 6 courses in Dallas. We secured a loan from Dallas Water Utilities in the amount of $5 million. They had millions and millions of dollars in an account saving up for future lake construction that was not being utilized. We were able to tap into that. Renovate Tennyson Highlands first, which became a first-class course, really the premier public golf course in North Texas, to compete with the suburban courses that were being built all over North Texas. We were falling way behind and were able to enter the market. We upgraded our greens fees. We're able to pay off our debt in 5 years on a 30-year loan, and then after Tennyson, began to also reconstruct other golf courses, including Cedar Crest, which dates to the 1920s. It was actually a private country club with a clubhouse designed by Charles Dilbeck, just as an aside, that was torn down later. We built a beautiful new clubhouse designed by Good Fulton and Farrell. Thank you, Duncan. And that course was transformed. It was the site of the 1927 PGA Championship, the first major played in the United States west of the Mississippi River, here in Dallas at Cedar Crest. Stevens was also a historic course that received a lot of love and attention over the years. It was redesigned with several holes moved around to capture these incredible views of the downtown Dallas skyline. And a beautiful skyline looking west from the clubhouse. A lot of money in the bond programs over the years for recreation center renovations, expansions, and in this case, one of the new centers built from the ground up. We selected, this was a replacement center in South Dallas near the University of North Texas campus. We selected a site that was adjacent to a DART station, which was the first time that had ever been done, building a recreation center that touched a DART station. A beautiful landscape by Kevin Sloan, and a beautiful building designed by Perkins and Will, inside and out. This is our largest recreation center, about 25,000 square feet. Again, not competing with the suburban rec centers that are sometimes in the 80 to 100,000 square feet range, but nevertheless, an incredible, extraordinary architectural project in the South Dallas neighborhood. Our aquatic system also got a lot of attention, and some of you may remember that we actually sold a piece of property at Lake Ray Hubbard called Elgin B. Robertson Park in 2015 or so. Sold it to a developer. It was the only time that we had ever sold a piece of park property, but the income, the revenue from that sale, which when put together with some supplemental bond funds, funded the construction of a new aquatic system for the city of Dallas, taking us from our pools. The newest pool was probably built in 1961. That was our newest facility, built in 1961. We built with the funding from the sale and the bond programs. We were able to build 9 family aquatic centers and also expanded and renovated Bahama Beach, which is shown here. It was originally built in 2000, needed updating, so we were able to do that. This was the first urban water park, in other words, a family aquatic center built in a big city, not in a suburban community. First urban water park built in America off of Redbird Lane and Highway 67. So this is here, a new aquatic attraction is being built here, shown in this aerial view. We also built 6 spray grounds out of that money. So the total income from the sale and bond programs represents an investment of about $84 million to build all of these aquatic facilities. Here's a good example of one at Samuel Grand Park, showing in the upper left the before condition. A dumb rectangular pool with very little to no recreational value. However, it had a pretty cool clubhouse, so to speak, and you can see how it was transformed with the facilities in the upper right, and then the original clubhouse shown on the bottom slide. The attendance after all this work was done went from about a pre-aquatics program. Annual pool attendance in Dallas was about 118,000 people. We went up to 240,000 within a year and a half. And now, after, of course, COVID took that back down, but now the attendance is built back up, and I think we're hoping to see a great season, especially with our recent temperatures. Here's some more views of an aquatic facility. This one designed by Ibanez Shaw. Greg Ibanez, formerly a Dallas architect. This is at Lake Highlands North, and a new aquatic center at Crawford Elam Park in Pleasant Grove, and an aquatic center in North Dallas by GSR Andrade. So just 3 of the 9 that have been built. One is just opened earlier this summer at Bachman Lake. The pavilion program was something that was close to my heart, and it began with this small facility a pavilion project built at Lindsley Park in East Dallas, Hollywood, Santa Monica. We worked with the neighborhood association there who had revenues from their annual home tour. It was another partnership project. We were able to put some bond money to it. The architect was BRW. Valletta Lil lived 2 blocks from this house, so I lived 3 blocks from this park. So there's a lot of planetary alignment on this, but a beautiful pavilion that reflected the architectural character, the sort of Tudor revival character of the neighborhood. This set the precedent where we saw for the first time that something special could be done with these pavilions. During the 1960s, there were several pavilion construction eras in Dallas. Original pavilions, the oldest ones, probably dated to the 1920s, the oldest parks. Then in the 1930s, during the WPA and CCC time frame, many rock pavilions were built, and especially in Oak Cliff. And then during the 1960s, as Dallas was expanding rapidly with new suburban and neighborhood development, the park department built these, what we called concrete double T's on pipe columns. There were 40 or 50 of them built throughout the city. They served their function very well, but by the late 1990s, they were derelict, dark, and oppressive places to be. So we knew we needed to replace them, and we saw the opportunity to do something special by bringing great architecture into the neighborhoods of Dallas for the first time. In a city known for its architectural landmarks downtown, we were able to bring significant architecture. So there were probably, the first map I showed you, probably had 32, 35 pavilions that were all custom designed by Dallas, starting with Dallas architects, really good top-notch architects in the city of Dallas with their firms here. Then as word got out, people from other cities started wanting to design pavilions in Dallas, other cities in Texas, and eventually we were even expanded to, by later in the pavilion program, this being an example of a pavilion in southern Dallas designed by Snohetta, who also designed the 9/11 Memorial in New York City, the Alexandria Library, the Oslo Opera House. So this was the quality level of architects that we were attracting later in the pavilion program. And this is their pavilion, College Park. And then I was able to squeeze one in at the former Randall Park across from Woodrow Wilson High School. Another major project for the department in the realm of architecture was the Trinity River Audubon Center, which was just designed by Antoine Prédoct, one of the great architects in America at that time, still is. This beautiful visitor pavilion that became the national flagship for the National Audubon Society, equal or above any other nature center that they had anywhere else. Okay, that's the end of my part. Now I'm going to introduce and turn the mic over to Bud Melton.
Thank you, Willis. Thank you all for being here. Great seeing all these friends. I kind of was told this is going to be a retrospective, and this is one of my favorite photos I took years ago. And it really is unique to be able to look back and see, okay, rail trails have been a very core part of the overall connections that we've been able to make. Thanks also to people like Encore and to Dallas Water Utilities and the creeks and the greenways. We've got so many opportunities. It's been amazing to see how much progress we've made, though. So I'll share with you what the Katy Trail looked like. After they took up the tracks, it was salvaged. They got good salvage value for those tracks. And there's a little more story to that we don't have time for today. But I will say that it became, in people like Trammell Crow's mind, with the Dallas, at the time was Dallas Parks Foundation, and Jeanette, you're here, Dallas Trees Foundation became Texas Trees Foundation, still doing great stuff, but it was a way of looking at an abandoned rail right-of-way as something that could be a green space connector. And thanks to the work that was done by my wonderful wife, Annie, with groups in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere to help change the paradigm with how our transportation mobility gets funded. The congressional authorization signed into law by George H.W. Bush in 1991 was called the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act, and it actually commanded the regions to include walkability, bikeability, and our access to transit in our overall way that we do the planning. So that was a big step forward. The first plan that was adopted as part of our long-range mobility plan had 435-mile interconnected network of off-street hike and bike trails, and you can see that there were a lot of pieces to put together, but it was a big, ambitious start. And I'm proud to say that Dallas County stepped up right away and said, well, we want to do a more granular study. We've got 30 cities within the county. Let's have a closer look. Dr. Albert Half had done the open space preserves plan for Dallas County, and they called on us to work with Dr. Half to develop a countywide trail plan. And I'll note, if you saw Amy Martin's op-ed the other day about trails and the importance of natural surface trails in addition to, as well as the paved trails, there's 135 miles of natural surface trails in the overall master plan that the county has continued to build out and make these connections, working with individual cities. And so it's pretty impressive. We look 10 years later at what happened with the Katy Trail. That same abandoned rail line has become a pretty special place. And who's been on the Katy Trail? Show of hands. Ah, good. Okay. So don't need to say any more about the Katy Trail. It's a pretty cool place. Paul Dyer always praised us greatly for helping to make that come to pass. On the opening day of the Katy Trail, and I see Mike Kuttner is here with us tonight. Raise your hand, Mike. Mike and I met on the opening day of the Katy Trail, and he said, hey, there's people over on the other side of the freeway that would like to have a trail over there. We've got some old rail sightings. Think we could do anything with that? Annie and I looked at each other and said, let's talk. And lo and behold, 10 years later, it was just a few years later, it took us about a year and a half to put together the master plan. We spent a lot of time crawling under bridges and looking at the old meanders, the original course of the Trinity River before it was moved. And we found just a tremendous resource there that spoke to us. And the plan that was adopted not only by the park board, but by the city council. And that was designated as city parkland. And it became part of the overall regional connections out to the Trinity River and over to the Katy Trail, and really a very significant place you can see from Highline and the Victory District all the way up into the old industrial district. And, that was there because of the levees. It created a place for the warehouse distribution centers to take place. And then when they didn't need those sightings anymore, it became a new order of opportunity. Willis, in 2015, you all brought in HRNA advisors, and they did an economic development study based in part on the Clyde Warren Park and also on the Katy Trail. And they said, for every public dollar spent on a park, an urban park, another $8 to $15 of private investment will follow. And I think we've seen that happen with Clyde Warren Park. And then they said, for the Katy Trail, for example, for every public dollar spent on an urban trail, another $50 will follow. And I was at the council briefing that day, and it was astonishing. The city council looked around at each other and said, how can we not do that? And that's the single most important investment Dallas could make. Dallas has continued to make that investment. Speaks volumes. I was pleased that an article I wrote that was published on Springboard for AIA a few years ago was featured at the Cultural Landscape Architecture Foundation. And at the time, we were talking about how important it is to have trails as part of our urban design, our urban form. People want to get out into nature. COVID taught us we want to get out into nature. Tap, tap. This thing working? Yes. It's out there, and we can get to it. So Willis, in partnership with Dallas County, Alberta Blair, the county has done a great job of implementing through its road and bridge districts, the 4 commissioner districts, and making it possible to continue building out what's not just in the city of Dallas, but all of the other cities in the region. A lot of credit goes to the county for what they've come forward with. Willis asked me to talk a little about the Trinity Forest Spine Trail. Our recently departed Philip Henderson, who was chairman of the Katy Friends Board for years. Philip and I worked together for many years on the Katy board. I was on that board for 10 years. They brought us in to get that built, but even before that became a vision, there was a group in the southern part of the city that said, we want to evaluate White Rock Creek and its green resources and look at it for what it can be for connectivity. And we brought in the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program from the National Park Service. They were very gracious to help us create a vision. We had a multi-day charrette, and the Trinity Trust and the city then came back and said, well, we'd like to have you do a master plan, which we started in 2012. It was adopted in 2014, and there were some funds put together in the bond program, and even the county has come forward with some more funds to help get it started. And then the Loop Dallas nonprofit group, which Philip was chair of, really has come forward in a big way and said, let's get this done, a 50-mile loop. And you can find their website and read more about what their other connections are. But this is a big part of what we're doing for them. And I say I just retired from HAF, 7 years and 3 months, and I don't remember exactly how many days, but I will tell you that, and they very deservingly won the Texas ASLA Merit Award for 2023 for the work that they've done, all the way from the Santa Fe Trail up by White Rock Lake, and reaching all the way down to connect even the Joppy community and the Dolphin Heights community and Parkdale community, all onto a central trail system that goes to not just one but 2 different DART stations and provides a lot of mobility alternatives as well. That's that modal optionality. Federal Highways just invented that term, and it's a good term, modal optionality. Say that 3 times. So HAF in particular was well suited to pursue that. And I give them a lot of credit for understanding the natural systems and all of the different impacts and conditions that have to be assessed before you can even start to do the civil work. And so I give them a lot of kudos for understanding how those processes are necessary and also fleshing out what the human systems have done and impacted. So that trail now has just opened up last weekend. I didn't drive, I rode my bike, I promise, pedaled. It was a heart-pounding experience. And that's the new trail that goes through Tennyson Park from Santa Fe Trail, just south of the spillway at Garland Road, and goes almost all the way down to 30. They've got just a few hundred yards to go, and that fencing will come down and that trail will be open. That's a concept that was illustrated by some of the landscape architects, and this is the real deal right here. And even negotiating our way under not one, but we'll have 2 railroad tracks that we'll have to cross either under or over. And I thought when I saw the fencing, I thought, oh my gosh, chain link fencing, concertina wire, that doesn't seem very green. But then I thought back to the opening of the Katy Trail, and it too had chain link fencing at first. Attitudes do change, I promise. Attitudes do change. Say it 3 times. So this is it going through the golf course and across some of the tributaries there along White Rock Creek. And even this tagging that's been done is kind of artistic. And I have to say, you know, what do we do but maybe have some art there in the public? So just real quickly, a couple of real cool developments have occurred the last few years. One is the DFW Discovery Trail has been designated, soon to be signed, a trail that connects all the way from Fort Worth to Dallas as part of the regional VilaWeb, that map that I showed you when we first got started, which has expanded tremendously. But we, HAF and other firms, are just in the final throes of getting the last pieces together. So if you're like me from Fort Worth, you can ride your bike all the way over to Dallas. If you forgot your lunch, you can catch a train and go back to the city of Fort Worth. I love Dallas. Got here in 70, 71, and loved it ever since. Go to this. If you put down nctcog.org 2045 update, that is the mobility plan, and you can see these maps, and then it's an interactive map that will tell you all about the different connections that can be made through our greenways and through our cities. And the other thing that was really cool, Steve Smith, raise your hand. Steve led the effort with the Trinity Coalition to get the designation of the National Water Trail. National Park Service, only National Park Service Water Trail designation in the state of Texas. That also connects us on many miles, lots of put-ins and takeouts, and connects us to the greenways. So you can go to that website that I had up there a moment ago, and trinitycoalition.org. Don't worry about paddling trail, you'll get there. And it too is very cool. And all I will say is that what we've discovered through all of this, many, many years, cool things that have been done. Civic space matters. Boeing knew that. Bezos knew that. Look at what we're doing. It's pretty cool. So continue to support it. I come across as an advocate. Call me an advocate. Thank you.
And I will say I am an advocate for public space. And so thank you, Bud, for that great lead-in, because the space between the places matter. And when I was told in 2006, 2007, that someone was thinking about building a park over a freeway, I was working in the sports industry in Dallas, and I thought, that will never happen. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Let's just, okay, let's see what happens. Well, it's been open since 2012. Construction began in 2009, but the vision for it came a lot earlier than that. And many of you may have heard talks on Clyde Warren Park before, and I thank you for that. So I was thinking when I was invited to come tonight, I wanted to bring something new to the equation. And I thought I would be remiss if I didn't give an opportunity to give you sound bites, to give you information to use in your individual practice, to think about how you can advocate for creative spaces like this. So if you'll indulge me for just a few seconds, I want to think back to what can parks like this, and the parks that Amy's going to talk about, and the trails that Bud mentioned, and the Parks Department, what can they do in the communities where you're working? Clyde Warren Park wasn't the first deck park in the country by any stretch of the imagination. But who knew that at the time? But it has sparked vision and opportunity, an entrepreneurial mindset in cities around the country and around the world. When I was at Clyde Warren, a lot of my time was spent giving tours, which is actually how I came to work for the designer of the park, OJB Landscape Architecture. When I left the sports industry to go run a nonprofit, to run a park over a freeway, that was not my career trajectory when I got into my career early on. But I'm so thrilled that I had the chance to do it, because now people see these public spaces, they can be entertainment, they can be respites, they can be passive, they can be active. Clyde Warren Park built a business model to sustain itself. And there are other communities around the country that are taking advantage of a moment in time with infrastructure investment, with reconnecting communities grants, with resilient grants, with a lot of federal opportunity to look at infrastructure as public space. And we're so proud of the role that Clyde Warren Park has played in this national conversation. My map disappeared. There is a map of the United States that's supposed to be right there. But the gist of it, I can see it right here. The gist of this image, and probably the next one that you're not going to be able to see, is that there were freeway parks, lids, caps, decks in other places. But where are they being considered now? And this is not a comprehensive list. Oh, you can see the map. All right. This is not a comprehensive list, but this is just to show you that this idea has grabbed root. It's taken hold, and people are inventing. There was no groundbreaking for Clyde Warren Park. It was ground-making ceremony. And when you think about the value of green space, our pandemic has shown us that public parks, green space, it's one of our most important spaces. It's where nature and the urban environment intersect. It's where people can come together and create community. It's equitable space. They are our most democratic spaces. If they're a parklet, if they're a park, if they're a destination, if they're a nature preserve, the value, as Bud pointed out, is exponential when cities and communities continue to invest in real estate. So the idea of this overnight success that we call Clyde Warren was actually born back in the 60s when the idea was made to sink the freeway, to separate what is now downtown and uptown. Anyone in here remember this? Dallas in the 60s? Several of you do. And so who would have ever thought when that decision was made, and it was made across the country, how that impacted communities, how we separated industry, we separated neighborhoods, we separated culture. And now we have a chance to heal those wounds, to bring communities back together, just like we're doing at Southern Gateway, bringing the neighborhood back together. So the role that Clyde Warren Park has played in this conversation, we think is profound, and it was designed in such a way so that it could be programmed and activated. And at OJB, we think of the word program with two definitions. The noun, the design moves you make to bring people into the space, but also the verb, the action, the activities you do to bring people in. Clyde Warren Park was a public-private investment to get it constructed. $112 million was raised. It was an idea that was born through the cumulative efforts of the Real Estate Council, Crescent Real Estate, Jody and Sheila Grant. There were individuals who had common ideas that came together and simply wouldn't take no for an answer. Amy and I were talking about this earlier. And many of these visionary spaces have civic champions. They partner with the elected officials. They find creative ways to finance projects to get them done. So $20 million from a bond from the city, $20 million from TxDOT. During the recession in 2008, 2009, we had a shovel-ready project. We were going, and then we benefited from federal stimulus money, and $55 million in private money was raised. So that of that $112 million, $97 million was spent to build it. That delta is what we used to operate in the early days until we could become self-sufficient, till we could generate operating capital from 5 revenue streams to cover all of our expenses. And the ripple effect of what has happened, the economic impact, the communal impact, the social impact has been profound. And I always love to show these images. Willis was part of this process. He knows good and well what the engineering minds, the creative geniuses that even made this possible. And in my layman's terms, because I'm not an architect or an engineer, I call this the lasagna. It is the Clyde Warren Park lasagna. It is all the layers that go into making this park possible. And the original idea had it elevated. It was up on a podium. Imagine driving around the park and not being able to see in. But the design team that was part of this project said, that's not what we're going for. We want sight lines. We want porosity. We want people to be able to see kids playing. There were no kids living downtown when this park was envisioned, yet it has a major children's park that just expanded to celebrate its 10th birthday last year. So getting the engineering right, getting those 300 beams that run north-south to make up the foundation, putting those troughs in between so that trees could live in that space between the beams, giving those trees enough root zone to grow. They're very, very happy out there. If you haven't been to Clyde Warren Park recently, the tree canopy has knit together. It has created shade where there was none before. So that system that's out there, and if you didn't know it, you wouldn't look at those trees and realize they're planted in these beams. They're planted in that void space because they're in a line. But when you experience it out there, you're not thinking about that. I promise you, next time you go out there, you're going to look and you're going to notice the trees are all lined up. I didn't even realize it in the beginning. So this process was part of there was community engagement, just like you should do for every civic project. But there was also an opportunity, a vision for what it could be, what it should be. This is the original program. This is the noun. These are the design moves that were made to create the original space. It was designed with the intention of generating revenue to cover its operating budget. So that's a little bit of a different mindset when you think about designing parks and open space. It was also intended to be relaxing, to be natural, to be a respite in an urban environment. So it needed to be able to flex up, to host big events when it needed to, and also be comfortable if you just wanted to go read a book or play with your kids. And it needed to feel right-sized and not prescriptive. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't sit on a bench, face this direction. It was rearrange the furniture, use it the way you and your family would like to. So the increase in, again, there is a lot of imagery that's not showing up right here, but the economic impact of this has been $6.2 billion in investment since the park opened, which has resulted in occupancy raising. If you were to look at a heat map from downtown Dallas towards the Arts District into Uptown, we say we don't have beachfront property, we now have parkfront property, and we're so pleased that there are more parks now to engage in the development all over downtown. So I said Clyde Warren Park's been a very successful model. It is owned by the city of Dallas. It is privately managed by the Woodall Rogers Park Foundation. And I would be willing to bet a lot of you think there is just magic fairy dust that gets sprinkled over it, and that's how the bills get paid. But they are very intentional, very creative. Kit and her team at Clyde Warren Park now are doing over 1,300 free programs and events annually. They're serving about $1.2 million in guests annually. They have 5 revenue streams that cover all of those costs. And it's hard generating income for parks and public spaces, but that was the mindset, that was the intentionality of how it was designed. It's been a tremendous environmental impact, just the amount of trees and green, the heat island effect that's been mitigated by introducing grass, making sure it's natural grass, it's not negatively impacting our stormwater system. It's just a space that we all can be very, very proud of. It's had a profound impact on the North Texas area, and I thank you for giving me a chance tonight to show you a little bit about a little 5.2-acre park built over a highway that I love dearly. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to go a little different direction than Kit because our projects were not designed to be economically sustainable, so unfortunately. But they are designed to bring green space to an area of Dallas that really was never meant to have green space, and that is our civic core, our CBD. It's surrounded by, the freeway loop, and this was an area where there were no parks. It was strictly a commercial district. So Parks for Downtown Dallas is a nonprofit that was established in 2015, but we've been around longer because we were actually the Belo Foundation. So we were a private foundation doing work, and we got involved very early on because of our chairman, Robert Deckard, who Mayor Laura Miller appointed him to chair the Inside the Loop Commission in 2002. And this was, as Bud referenced, I think Bud referenced, one of you referenced, Boeing. And that was the start of that commission to analyze our downtown. So in 2004, a downtown master plan was created. And that plan was unanimously approved by the City Council and the Dallas Parks Board to say we need green space in downtown. And as out of that plan, we had 3 parks evolve. 2009, Main Street Garden, and that the city did entirely on its own. No private philanthropic dollars were engaged. The park department managed that process, hired the landscape architect, built this park in the center of the city, and it opened in 2009 with the Christmas tree celebration and Mayor Leppert leading that. In 2012, we opened Civic Garden. Civic Garden is at the corner of Griffin and Main, across from the Earl Cabell Federal Building. It was known in the plan as the Griffin Street Garden. And this park has a unique, I think the trees there are absolutely fabulous. It has now been open over 10 years. We actually started on this project. We made a commitment to the park department in 2006 that we would pledge the money for the design and the construction if the city would purchase the land and abate that land. And that happened in the 2006 bond program, but that land was incredibly contaminated. And so it took a very long time, and in fact, it took almost $2 million to remediate that park site before we could actually build the park. We broke ground in April of 2011 and opened in May of 2012. And for those of you that haven't seen it in a while, I'd really encourage you to go see the trees, because they really, to speak about shade, Tara and I have been talking about the shade problems that we all have in this heat, is a wonderful respite. And then you can see Clyde Warren obviously came right on the heels of that in October. So those three park sites were actually identified in the 2004 master plan. In 2014, let me back up 1 second. In 2013, the master plan was updated because the recession changed a lot of things real estate-wise in the urban core. So we asked Mary Margaret Jones with Hargraves Jones. She had been a part of the original team in 2004 to create the first master plan. She came back in and updated that plan and identified new park sites, and 4 particular parks were identified in the 2013 plan. So in 2013, actually, Belo was sold, and so our foundation was a standalone entity, and our trustees said, we're no longer going to be making grants in journalism education and other things like that. We'd like to dedicate all of our resources to ensuring that the 2013 master plan gets created and developed. And so we took our assets and basically said to the city, we'll pledge our endowment if you get us into the next bond program and match us. We think we can build all of these parks if we have those resources. So we started a little early, I will say. In 2014, we started buying property for one of the park sites. That was Harwood Park. We were very concerned with what was starting to happen in the real estate market, and we were afraid that by the time the park department had the resources to buy that property, it would be out of their reach. And so we started doing that to get that site under control. The 2 of the other sites were already owned by the city, and then the 4th site, Weston Square, was actually in the 2006 bond program for land acquisition, but the city had not been able to acquire that site. So we set our sights on that one as well. But in 2015, we actually launched our organization, became a nonprofit that was not a private grant-making foundation any longer. We are a private operating foundation which sits in the middle of private foundations and public charities, so we can accept donations, but we don't have to actually have a distribution amount annually either. So we've used our resources there, and that's when we launched our organization and began our work in trying to develop these parks. And I think most people seem to think these kind of came out of thin air and happened pretty quickly. But for those who have been involved know how long it took. Chuck McDaniel, my friend here from SWA, was along with us on that journey. And without the guidance of Willis, I don't know how this all would have gotten done. But the first park that we built we didn't even have any bond dollars. It was basically the city taking a chance on us and asking us to, would you build this park and fund it all on your own? And oh, by the way, would you give us $1 million for an endowment? And that's what we said, yes, okay, we'll do this. And so that's our first park was Pacific Plaza. So this is just a slide to really help you understand the funding, but we had our monies and some private donors step in to help as well. And then we had $35 million in the 2017 bond program, and the $4.4 million was left over from the 06 bond program that had been dedicated for West End Square. And this is just a rendering of where these spaces are. The light green 3 spaces, you see Clyde Warren up at the top at Uptown, those are the 3 that exist, from the 2004 plan, and then the other 4 are from the 2013. Our first park was Pacific Plaza out of this batch, Priority Parks. It's 3.74 acres. Chuck and his team led the landscape architecture design of this park. We love it. It's very unique and special. And as you can see, it was surrounded by already established high-rises. There's residential, there's office. The state's largest hotel, the Sheraton, backs up to this park site. So it's got already a built-in constituent. Tara mentioned public input and engagement. We've done that with every single one of these parks. It's been really important. So for instance, I'll show you a picture in a minute where there are swings in this park, and that came out of public input because there were no children really living in this area, but adults said, we want swings that we can use. And they don't really have those in the catalogs, so to speak. So Chuck had to design those. So it's fun. This was a parking lot, I would say. For any of you who had driven past that and during the time, you remember it was not the best looking parking lot. And I will say, going back to the 06 bond program, the money was in that program to buy this property and Trust for Public Land. So we love the TPL. They're all great partners. They helped the city buy this property. And in 2008, a sign went up on the corner that said, "Park coming soon." So think about that. This stuff takes a while to get done. So this is the pavilion that is, if you've watched NFL Tonight, you've seen it when they do the shots of Dallas when the Cowboys are playing. But this was designed by HKS Line. HKS's corporate headquarters are right behind this park in One Dallas Center. So Chuck brought them on board, and they designed this pavilion as well as the restroom building. This is a special pavilion because for those of you that know, the Pacific Railroad line went all the way from El Paso to New Orleans, right past this park. And this the hole punches in this pavilion represent all the depot stations along that train rail from El Paso to New Orleans. So it's kind of got a little hidden gem there. Lots of trees, wonderful landscape. And this was one of I think the start of downtown parks really showing how diverse that they can be in their horticulture selections. And Chuck is the one who needs to be up here talking about this park. But I love this. It's a very special place. And the 7-foot grade change is what really also makes this very unique, because in a minute you'll see Harwood Park, same size park, but they look very different because of the grade change. And here are the swings. Obviously there are teeter-totters, but the swings are these wonderful structures. And every time we're out there, people are on the teeter-totters and the swings, but you see a lot of grown-ups sending their kids off so they can get on the swings. And this is one of the many charter schools that is in downtown Dallas. And these kids walk a few blocks over regularly. Every week they're out there playing. I've seen these kids also in Civic Garden having band practice. So it's really fun to see the children interacting with this park. And then the limestone wall runs through the whole park. And it's wonderful because Chuck designed this park not only for those of us that are on the ground interacting with it, but it's for all of those eyeballs that are surrounding the park. And so many people, you can go into these buildings and look down, and you have a fantastic view of this park that's very different from when you're standing in it. West End Square was the second park we did. First, we had to buy this property. That was the key thing we had to take care of first, was getting this little tiny parking lot acquired and under our control, which we then sold to the city. So it is part of their park inventory. This park, Willis asked us to do a RFQ process for this park, and we had four or five architecture firms, landscape architecture firms that we interviewed and made a selection with James Corner Field Operations. The team was amazing. They put so much energy into what is less than an acre, and you might not think that would be challenging to do, but they put as much love and thought and care into this park as any of the other parks, and it's really a creative space. We actually had the help with the Dallas Innovation Alliance. They sat on our team to help us think through the smart city aspect of this. You may recall during the Obama administration that they selected 10 cities across the country for smart city initiatives, and that Dallas was selected, and it was based in the West End. So we wanted to add some, I don't want to call it a smart park. Some people choose to. I call it a park with smart features. I think that is more accurate because we're constantly learning with these kinds of things. This park has several features. It's, like I said, it's very small, but it's really intimate. And this is a water feature that goes through 3 modes. This is the mist feature, then it can bubble, and then it's also very still. It's not interactive, so we're not inviting anyone to get into it, but it's perfect for children's hands. This is one of the key things that came out of the public input for this park. There's a lot of office workers around this area, and they wanted to be able to come outside. A lot of them are tech workers. They wanted to actually work outdoors. So this is a 50-foot custom designed work table that has the chargers built in and the outlet. And you can see the fans above. So this is not, those are not louvers that move. They're always set that way, but it really does provide a great level of shade. And then you have the large fans as well. And the furniture in this park, except that we have a lot of built-in Ipe wood benches, but there's also a lot of movable furniture. And what you can't see on the far side where you see the 555 luxury apartments, that's an apartment building right there. That's the side we call the porch. And we had these wonderful, gorgeous, heavy Ipe wood benches, porch swings. And the park department asked us to try to refrain the movement somewhat so no one would get hurt. Well, go to a Mavs game or Stars game afterwards, everyone's been drinking, they come and they just have to prove that they can push this, and so they broke every one of them. So we have been working on a new prototype for them, and they're actually in the works, and the first round were installed 2 weeks ago, but the gentleman, the subs, put them too high, so nobody could get their feet to touch the ground. So now we've gone back, we're remaking them in. So it's always something, you're always trying in these things. They don't always work as planned, but everybody wants the porch swings back, so that's really important. And the frame itself, it's a three-sided frame, is a plug-and-play system. So when we actually opened the park, we worked with Aurora, for those of you who are familiar with their work, and it was during COVID, so they worked with a Canadian artist who installed an art exhibit that we could all interact with, but no one had to touch. So it was really a wonderful way to launch this little gem of a park. Our third park is Carpenter Park. Carpenter Park was actually Carpenter Plaza, and it was dedicated in 1980. And it was really not a park that anyone could access. You would have been hit by a car. I mean, it was bisected by streets. They were zooming in and out. There was a large piece of public art by Robert Irwin, who is a very famous American artist. He's now in his late 90s, so he unfortunately is not able to travel, and he wasn't able to see the park come to fruition. But he designed his piece to go north-south, and it was in response to the I-345 highway and all the street infrastructure. And Mary Margaret Jones, Hargraves Jones, designed this park, and she and her partner, George Hargraves, were able to persuade Mr. Irwin to redesign his piece of art, which has never been done in any of his work. But it was the city's second most valuable piece of public art behind the Henry Moore that sits on City Hall Plaza. And I think everybody felt, the art community in particular, was very committed to, we are not going to be the city that threw away an Irwin, which was what he told us to do. And so it was a matter of time, but very persuasive people were able to persuade him to do something really unique and special with his art. And now it sits in the park, but it's on an east-west access at this. And you can see from this photograph, you see I-345, but we stitched together now the whole park site. So it's actually, 5.75 acres. It's got a fountain plaza here. This is at the corner of Pacific and Pearl, and it has gardens. It has wonderful granite pathways through the whole park. We added a little dog park at Willis's direction. Ultimately, there was a phase 2 that was underneath 345. You see the land between the two elevated freeways, and there was going to be an additional 2.6 acres where we would have had basketball courts, a skate park, and a dog park. We ran out of money, honestly. And so at that point, Willis said, let's put a little dog park over here, so we have that underneath the freeway. We also have a basketball court. The city council asked us to do that during COVID, and so we got rid of bocce and put in a basketball court. And we are so grateful we did, because it is actually the most used feature of this park, and it's used not around the clock, because the park's not open around the clock, but it's used around the year. So even today, on a day like today, people will be out there playing basketball because they're under the freeway, there's a breeze, and there is shade. So you can withstand the Texas heat when you're under there playing basketball. And here's a picture at night, because Hargraves Jones did a specific lighting scheme that would, mirrors the water feature and the pass of the fountain and what the fountain is doing. The lights will change. These two pieces on either side are the new pieces that Mr. Irwin designed. We had to buy these huge pieces of Corten steel. He had done this wonderful filigree pattern. We sent these pieces of Corten to a place in Houston, Texas, where they cut them with a laser water jet. So that's how these were made. And then Hurricane Harvey hit, and they got stuck there. So we had to wait for the water to recede for us to get the art piece back to Dallas. And then these were installed. But they're beautiful and they're bent. And if you have the time, I'd encourage you to go to our website, parksfordowntowndallas.org. And we have a 10-minute documentary on this piece of art that was done by Quinn Matthews here in Dallas. And it's really a great story, and I'd really encourage you to watch that if you have the time. So here's kids playing basketball at night even. One of the fun things was during construction, we actually had, Beck had cameras up, and so we knew who was coming and going from the site. And one night some people broke in, and the guys from Beck were watching this and said, should we do something? No, we're going to let it go, because they were just there to play basketball. Just wanted to play ball, and so we all felt like, you're going to come to play ball, that's okay. You're not doing any damage to the park. And here's the water fountain, and this is designed to replicate a bird's nest, these arcs that are all around, and then we have 5 jets in the center that go up. And like I said, it couples with the lighting underneath the elevated freeway. And this has been a huge draw, obviously, in the heat of the summer. Our last park that we're building is Harwood Park. This is right adjacent to the Farmers Market District. So we're really excited about this park in terms of the people that are actually living. The residential population in this area is very strong, whereas Carpenter really has very little. I mean, it has, obviously, it's right across the street from this building. And so you have the high-rise that Jack Matthews has recently built. And so there is housing here. But outside of that, there is not a lot of residential except on the other side of the freeway. So we do get people walking over from the apartments in the Wilson Historic District area. But we are anticipating that all the surface parking lots that are south of Carpenter, on the south side of Pacific, will ultimately most likely be developed at some point. And then Carpenter will really kind of have its day in the sun with a lot more attendance and use. Harwood is going to be day one. I've already met with the Farmers Market Stakeholder Association regularly. They have said this is their park, and they are so excited, and they're ready to go in. And Pamela, I'm thrilled you're here, because your home is probably going to play a very big role in this park, so thank you. It's, like I said, it's about the same size of Pacific's, but it's going to look very different. We swapped out here some construction photos, so I recognize this is obviously not a finished park. It's much further along than here it is in this photo. This lawn over here where you see the one gentleman in the blue hard hat right there in the middle, that's all now lawn, as an example. A lot of the planting's done. But what you'll see right there in the center is the Gold Ring Arbor. And for those of you who remember the Main Street Garden park site, there was a parking garage that was covered in those gold rings. Willis, in his brilliant mind, saves many, many things, and he puts them out into the boneyard. And Christy Tanaik is the landscape architect for this park. She's based in Austin, Texas, although she grew up here in Dallas, and her claim to fame is she worked for Lambert's Landscape, and she designed Paula Lambert's mozzarella company as her first commission. So we still have her, connected to Dallas very strongly, but she's in Austin now. And she went to the boneyard, and she fell in love with these gold rings and said, I've got to do something with them. And boy, did she. And we are so excited, and that's a stage there, can host all kinds of programming. We'll have concerts, obviously, salsa lessons, yoga lessons, and you've got the lawn. DDI will definitely be movie night, so a lot of programming will take place there. If you just go to the left, you see some areas, it's decomposed granite, but that's the Garden Grove. It's an elevated seating area, so you can sit up there and look out across the park. The big dirt area in the center will all be lawn, huge lawn. This park has got some nice green space that can be used just for play and doing whatever you want to do. Here are the mammoths. These are actually, Willis, Colombian mammoths, so everyone knows they're not woolly mammoths, they're not elephants. But Christy is a person that does a lot of research, and she did all the historic research on this site to understand what had been here. And you go all the way back, and we actually had Colombian mammoths that roamed this area down to the Trinity. So we worked with a Finnish company to develop this playscape, and that's kind of one of the lessons I learned from the Gathering Place in Tulsa, is that European playground designers don't have the same, they just are very much more creative and much less risk averse there than we are in America. So Christy did not want to buy a playground out of a catalog. And so this is what we did. We worked with the Finnish company, Lapset Play, who has a counterpart here in America that we worked with. And the trunks themselves, you climb up. The slides are in the inside. So everyone thinks they're sliding down the trunk, but you're actually climbing into the elephants. And then we have swings all around, because swings are something that people really want to do of all ages. So we put a lot more swings in this park as well. There's a water feature, a splash pad that will be on the other side. You see a little tiny building in the far left corner there, and that's the Park Services building. It's 408 South Harwood. There, we actually have 3 buildings on the west side of the park. In the historic district, the Harwood Historic District, the line literally runs behind all 3 of these buildings. So we obviously worked with Landmark Commission. Nancy McCoy was our architect on this project. And the small building will have all the park services, the restrooms, the pump room for the fountains, the electrical, have a small park office, and it will also have a community room that people could have a birthday party, for instance, or a meeting. And my hope is, keep my fingers crossed, that Gary Smith at Summerlee will give us a little grant to put a historic display in there, because this site has been a lot of different things, and it has had a fascinating history, a mayor to the film industry to the auto industry. I think most of these we already talked about environmental, and we worked with UTA Kappa to do a great environmental study, which we're really proud of. So we know these parks have added tremendous value environmentally to our urban core. And I will just do that and leave it there and turn it over to Willis.